Why do we identify with the villains in movies? The Joker, for instance, Heath Ledger's. There's something about his anarchy, there's something about his chaos that just draws us. It's almost as if we identify with viewing this world as absurd, as the structure of society as absurd and inherently flawed. Though most of us don't quite know why. We don't quite know what it is. We don't know quite what this flavor is. It's because this flavor is very complex. It's very diluted with a number of spices, kind of drizzled by a velvet fist. Villains are the aspect of ourselves that are unhappy with the state of things. Society, being a human being, our conflict with each other, not knowing really how to come together, but more specifically, our dissatisfaction with what being a person in society entails, with going to a crappy job that we don't really like. Most of us do that. Feeling like we don't have a sense of community, that even religion is structured, that our spirituality is structured. In school, the universal tries to be pushed upon us, but it isn't the universal. A universal doesn't need to change the particulates. Anything that is universal is naturally so, and the particulates will have that inherent within them. It doesn't need to change everything. The structure of education and laws, there's a lot of terrible things that governments have done in the past, over the hundreds of centuries that we've had governments in the form that we see now. And they think they can justify what they are, their founding, and what they have done by making slight changes, by trying to make things more universal, by making small shifts in laws that bite at the problem here and there. But we still feel the problem deep down. We still feel the problem within ourselves because these little bites work on top of an unconscious oppression. And when the state, any government, tries to justify what it has done in the past through these small changes, eventually, all in an attempt to defend itself, it begins to oppress. And there's something within us that wants to defend ourselves, that wants to say that we are more than this, that we are more than the societal structure that we find ourselves in. We are more than this crappy job that we go to, that we are more than these shallow experiences we have with people every fucking day. We are more than what we are on paper. And while slavery might be a thing of the past, I think that it might exist in a different form now. The fist didn't go away, it just layered more and more velvet around itself. So that when we're hit, there's softer punches. And everybody's hit. So that's just the way things are, right? And if everyone accepts the way things are as they are, nothing will ever change. So how do we rebel? Well, Camus would say that we have to find a piece of ourselves that we cherish so much, something within ourselves that we cherish so much that we cannot allow it to be harmed. For a spiritual person, it's easy actually. While this has been a political video up to this point, for a spiritual person, the state, the government, society, and it's not just all about government, it's about societal structure. It's about oppressive culture, and even corporate culture and capitalism, putting a money sign on everyone, putting a title on somebody saying you're verified to do this or that. Societal structure. But for a spiritual person, all these structures, we can still be who we are deep down. We can still believe what we believe. We can still practice our spiritual acts without too much interference. Besides going to a crappy job, besides being a part of a strange, oppressive society that we might not agree with, we can still be who we are, at least for a few hours a day. It'd be great if we could be ourselves the entire day. But even structures of communication don't allow that. And that's not government's fault. That's culture, even corporate culture. A far more political act would be to rebel in a more traditionally rebellious way. But let's return to why we identify with villains in movies, like the Joker, or even like that weird guy with the bowl cut in No Country for Old Men. I don't remember what his name is. That guy is more overtly violent, overtly like just killing anybody for no reason. But sometimes people still identify with that. A lot of people identify with Satan or Lucifer, and that's become a whole shift in cultural consciousness as far as what these figures actually were. Were they the same figure? Was Jesus and Lucifer the same being? They're both called the Lightbringer, Lucifer, or the Morning Star as well. But regardless, the more overtly violent ones, like that guy from No Country for Old Men who just goes around killing people to try to get that money. Some people identify with that. Why? There is something within us forced down by these unconscious decisions made by people in power around the world. Not necessarily just government, not just governments, but people in power. All these little decisions to subjectify us, to look at us as assets rather than people. Every decision by a ruler, every decision by a king, every decision by a president or prime minister, every decision by a sultan, every decision by a khan, over the years, it has changed the subconscious of man, forcing all of that personal value, all those people on the top, forcing our personal value down into the subconscious of our grander mind, so that in our conscious mind, things sometimes flash. We want to be violent. We want to be angry. Shouldn't be violent. It shouldn't hurt anybody. Let's say that first and foremost. I'm speaking in terms of theory. But all of this oppression and unrightness with the way things are have created a certain tendency to want to act out within the subconscious of man. The way to get around this is not necessarily to get around government or societal structure, but to find who we are. There's a reason I like the Upanishads better than the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedas, much better than the Vedas. The Upanishads are about finding your soul, the Atman, and experiencing Brahman, the soul that we're all a part of as an individual. There's many yogis, there's many saints who have had crappy jobs like us. Maharshi, God, I wish I could remember something Maharshi, but he was a cook in a restaurant because he had to make money, but he was also a great saint. And he found a way to act within this cage in a way that wasn't painful. We could try to tear down the cage, but is that realistic for every individual? Is that realistic for us to be able to do this? This cage has been built over centuries, over millennia even. You could say that patriarchal societal culture started with the Assyrians, maybe the Sumerians, and we've been on this 10,000 year progression towards using of our planet, using of ourselves, and being so alienated from being a human being that everything just falls apart eventually. I don't think it's going to fall apart soon. It might take hundreds of years. Everybody's always talking about it's about to fall apart. No, this cage is strong. It's not something that it's bigger than conservative, liberal. It's bigger than libertarian. It's bigger than anarchist. So I guess anarchists would just take themselves out of the whole situation, which I kind of lean more towards anarcho-primitivism, if I can say that term. That's been a recent term in the last couple of years. But that's kind of where I've come after studying history obsessively for 14 years, and I still do. But regardless, whatever's going to happen, it's not going to happen soon. I'm sorry. These cycles have been going on for hundreds of thousands of years. And just because we're on ground level, we can't think it's going to end soon. And we can't think that things are going to change soon. But what we can do is change things for ourselves within ourselves. This may sound like a very beta thing to say, but the idea of alpha male in society is also kind of ridiculous. But, I mean, if you want to rebel, that's one thing. But short of that, finding an inner peace, a lasting peace, a peace that you can find no matter what's happening around you. Being you, doing everything that you have to do in a way that feeds your soul, no matter what it is. Epictetus was a Stoic philosopher in ancient Rome. He was born a slave. He was not educated. And his master saw how intelligent he was and how keen his mind was and decided to get him educated. But he found a way to escape his slavery just with his mind. And he didn't have spiritual practices, just by his thinking. He found a way to escape, and no matter what happened to him, he was in a state of stoic bliss. You don't necessarily have to be spiritual to be something like Stoic, for instance. Stoicism is a philosophy. We can find ways within ourselves to, no matter what's happening around us, to be calm and happy within. It's very hard, very difficult, and it's less glorious than external rebellion, but it's way more long-lasting, it's more realistic, and ultimately if we believe in reincarnation or the transmigration of the soul, it leads to where we want to be quicker and more effectively than violence or anger or hate. And the hate does build up in us. That's why we identify with villains a lot of time in movies. And that's why we want to make justifications for them. Even in history, a lot of people make justifications for, God, some people even do it for Hitler or Stalin now, which is crazy on the far left. But some people, make excuses for Alexander the Great, crucified 10,000 people outside of the city of Tyre, men, women, and children, because the siege took too long, just because they wouldn't submit to him. Didn't have to take that city. That city was not attacking him. And he crucified 10,000 civilians just because it took too long. And we think that because it was back then that we can justify his actions. He was a terrible human being. He was a monster. Somebody that I would definitely have choice words with if I saw him in real life. But all of those violent decisions by long ago, by various government groups, by various rulers, by those patriarchs, those have effects on the structure that we find ourselves in. And make no mistake about it, we are in a cage. But how we choose to be in that cage is our decision. And maybe we can, through certain kinds of magic, maybe we can entertain those pieces of ourselves that want to act out on a more energetic sense than within. And magic isn't illegal yet. It'd be really hard to make it illegal. Even when it was illegal, it's still practiced. So there are other methods. But however you want to escape this cage, I think the reason why we identify with villains is because we feel we are caged. And the villains are the ones who act out against the cage that we are in, who try to tear at the system that we feel subjected by, oppressed by. And every system that they act out against is a mirror of the system around us, because that's what people make films with the current structure that we exist in. So it's almost like a mirror for our darker selves when we see a villain. And the heroes are also identified with, but it seems that things are getting a little bit deeper. So while this cycle is still progressing and structure isn't going to come crashing down anytime soon, people are starting to become more introspective and look within. And I think that's why villains and Satan and Lucifer, for instance, are becoming more interesting and more complex rather than black and white in our understanding and in the spiritual diversity that we find around us and our friends. At any rate, thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked this video. Hit the thumbs up down there. It really helps out the channel. Feel free to share this wherever you like. And most importantly, I want all of you to have a wonderful day.